do the same thing. I tend to talk many times when I'll just be listening because something's occurred to me that I want to tell somebody.
I'm afraid I'm going to forget. It's not that I'm
absolutely
trying to interrupt. I'm just trying to remind them.
When the older you get, that's the bigger the chance that is that you forget.
Do you think that when you get older, you have stuff that you see more of the issues coming or possibilities, and you almost step easier as opposed to when you're young and a gunslinger, you're going after it, and you don't know that thing may happen, that as you get older you say, man, that thing may happen.
Absolutely, I think you do. I think experience teaches us that. Branch Rickey had a saying that luck is the residue of design. And I've always thought about that when it comes to exactly what you're talking about. So many times we can plan ahead of because we've seen how things work out in the past. When you're young, you're just charging into the line. You don't have any idea what's there.
And you're probably going to make it.
Sure. Once you get there, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I was built this house one time, and they came out to set the electric meter.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, electric meters have to be 5 foot off the ground with a 6-inch variation. I guess that's for the meter reader.
Right.
Well, the grade was high, and it ended up being 4 feet.
Mm-hmm.
They would not pass it.
Really?
I had to dig up the whole, you could make it shorter, but you can't make it longer, and you can't have junction boxes for underground power, and it gets complicated. But so for 2 years later, I made a note, make sure the electric meter, and finally it never happened. I got tired of checking it, and I've just forgot it, and it's never happened again.
Right.
But I never walked by an electric meter without thinking, that thing needs to be 5 foot off the ground.
And I'm sure, as long as you've been doing it too, you sort of can eye it, and get a pretty good sense of we're probably within range there.
We're within. I think to myself, I'm within where I could argue it.
Right. It's a good place to be.
Yeah, you say I could argue that.
Yeah.
But as you get more experience, you get more of that. I don't want to call it fear, because it's not fear. It's not reluctancy. It's just more sure-footed.
Mm-hmm. Well, you recognize. I think you've seen the past, and you've observed, either you've lived it or if you watch somebody else live it and do it, and you think to yourself, I know what's going to happen when that happens. We start as a child. I mean, it's as simple as burning our hand on a stove.
You don't know a stove's hot until you touch it, or somebody tells you.
That's right. But then, and even if they tell you, sometimes you don't know what that means as a child. I mean, I don't remember burning my hand on a stove, but I'm certain that I did. Mm-hmm. But it's experience teaches us, and it's probably experience and judgment are probably the two things that we get the most out of getting older. We tend to. You're right. The word you used was perfect. We tend to react when we're younger. We just tend to see something and go, "Oh, I'm going to do that."
Yeah.
I think being informed by judgment and experience creates a whole new way of looking ahead, and you'll see way down the road, oh, that's a hot stove. I know not to get a hold of that.
When I was little, I stepped next to a wall that had carpet tacks underneath it, and it didn't have baseboard, and I stepped on my bare foot on the carpet, and the carpet was so thin that the carpet tacks. So to this day, I won't walk real close to a wall.
Yeah.
Even though the odds of that, and I've got shoes on, but
memory teaches us.
But now it can also be a little bit of that reminds me of when you came in, when I was talking about at Andy Griffith episode, The Busy Man.
Yeah.
He was doing that. He was trying to get to the next town.
Absolutely.
He was a salesman. He needed to get the car fixed, and
he didn't understand.
He didn't understand, or he thought they didn't understand.
That's right. So
and
they didn't understand him on a Sunday.
No.
We'd come out of church and here this fella is. I mean,
Remember when he went to Wally's house to sit on the porch? He said, "Yeah, I can fix it." He said, "But I can't fix it today."
And you know, I think.
You remember the last scene of that show?
I'm trying to think.
He was sitting on the porch and he had peeled the apple without breaking it.
Yes.
And he fell asleep with the.
Yes.
But are those days over?
Probably. I was talking with some folks the other day about what was important in my mother's and father's generation, what was important in my generation, and what's important in my children's generation. And it's all about interacting with people, but it's changed in every generation. The example that I gave them was, I can remember my mom and dad, and my mom in particular, talking about, they lived in Polk County, and that mom and dad were both raised in Polk County. And once or twice a year, they would come in, they would get the sorghum, the cane out of the fields, and it was a big day. I mean, they would have this huge press. Everybody would come in, and they would, and it was a big thing, and everybody would just stop. You know, everybody would stop whatever they were doing because it was a big thing. I can remember as a kid, we would have family cookouts, like fish fries or whatever, at my grandmother's house. We'd all sit on the porch till, I don't know, 10, 11 o'clock at night. We'd stop, and we'd just interact. Now, in my children's generation, they don't stop to interact. And unfortunately, that same thing's happening to us. We got our cell phone up, we're talking constantly, we're responding to an email. We're returning a phone call, and people expect a return call because they know you've probably got a cell phone with you.
Oh, that drives me crazy.
And so, the way we interact, while it's all the same, the way we interact with our friends, the way we interact with our business partners, it's changed dramatically to where it's not, hey, let's go have lunch and spend an extra 30 minutes getting to know about these people's family. Now it's, can I send you an email with here's what we'd like to do, or it's the same in my business. I mean, instead of walking down the hall to talk to one of my assistants, I'll send them an email and say, hey, here's what we need to do on this. You ask me a question, here's my answer. And I try to, I try to discipline myself not to do that.
It's hard, and you've got to, now it's like, I hate it when people say, well, I don't have it, but I've got it in an email.
Yeah.
Well, print it.
Yeah.
Put it in your pocket, because you may forget the email.
Sure.
We had a job the other day, and the lady was waiting on something from the environmental people. We all waited, and 4 weeks gone by. Come to find out, it had been sent from the people in Nashville, but it had gone to her spam.
Yes.
And she didn't know to look it up in the spam. So those are problems.
Sure.
That you wouldn't have had before, and so maybe it's not a savings time.
I don't know that it is. We probably, I don't know if we get more done or not than we used to. I mean, certain things are faster. When I first came into the practice of law, we were just making the changeover, the real serious changeover in every office to word processors. It had just become sort of the norm. And so all those things are much quicker. But you can't tell it. If you look at the way cases are handled now, things are no faster now than they were then. Maybe slower than they were, even though we've leveraged all this technology into it.
Why is that? I can't put my finger on it, but you're exactly right. If it's faster, it's 5 minutes. It's not extraordinary.
No, and I'm sure the same thing is true in your business.
Oh.
That you all can exchange building plans or site plans or approvals or whatever immediately today. But it doesn't change the way a building has to go up. It doesn't change how things have to cure and dry and all that other kind of thing.
You're exactly right. I can email the sheetrock finisher all I want, and the mud's not going to get dry any sooner.
No, and so I think we live in a false perception that things are faster because we can talk about it faster. But at the end of the day, whether it's building a building or building a road or
cooking eggs.
That's right. I mean, the stove we have today is a lot more expensive and a lot more
and
extravagant.
Microwaves.
That's right. But it doesn't. 30 seconds is 30 seconds. Popcorn cooks the same way. By the way.
I was thinking the other day, even the old, the microwaves they're faster,
Sure.
but I don't know. It seems like it's. Have you ever heard that? Who was it? Winston Churchill or Calvin Coolidge? If you want something done, get the busiest guy in town.
I've heard that saying, yes.
And there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
It says that he will find somewhere to fit the minutes while other people are waiting. So maybe there's a secret into being busy that is, because his way I read, it's a pretty long poem or whatever you want to call it, saying, but the fact is that the busier, and I always think about an airplane, it's got to have so much speed to get up in the air. You can't just coast up.
Right.
It's got to get a certain amount of speed. And I'll find that on jobs. I'll have, if I got 5 jobs going, they'll go faster than 4 jobs, even though that makes no sense. And they'll actually be a little bit cheaper. I know it's economies of scale, but I think there's an economies of scale that's related to time.
I think you're right. And it imposes on you a new level of efficiency. Anytime you've got more than you can do, you have to figure out, how am I going to make this work? And in your business, you can't cut corners. Things have to be built appropriately. As we said, mud dries at a certain rate, and so you've got to figure all that out. I think that's true. I think that people who learn to manage time, we see it as managing time from our phone. Again, I go back to that, but that's the central hub most of our lives now are connected to, at least for our work, and or our computer, and we're fine at getting that out, and we're super efficient at responding, but we can't change. All we can do is be more efficient in those in-between times, in between when the mud goes on, to be ready as soon as the mud is done, that somebody else is ready to come in and take over. And that, I think, when you've got 5 jobs instead of the 4, you've got to have, your painters have got to get to the next one. The only way they're going to get there to meet that deadline is if they're, as soon as that mud's dry and it's finished, it's ready to go.
You're exactly right. You can't email the travel distance or say you speed up these parts of this business, but these parts still take the time. Now they're almost unequally yoked.
Absolutely.
And so it's like two horses pulling at different rates. Maybe that's what creates the chaos.
Maybe, and maybe the efficiency you're talking about comes from when you learn, again, because of experience, that I know that this is about to slow, so I need to time this one so that it comes out and I'm ready to pick this one up right then.
Right.
But I think you're right. I think there is an economy of scale, but there's also an economy of time that they aren't connected in some ways, but they're linked without being able to be broken.
You can't separate them.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the summary. You can't separate. But now we've got to deal with it because everybody else is. Going back to the word processor, that was just a calculator, a typewriter, and a filing cabinet all in one machine.
That's right.
And then they added the telephone to it.
That's right.
But you can speed those processes up, but it doesn't speed the other stuff up. So I was thinking this morning when I got up, I thought, boy, I got a lot of jobs going. And I thought, well, I'll schedule it like this. I'll work it that way. And I was thinking, you don't have that in your job. You can't pick what comes in.
That's right.
Let me tell you about Capstar Bank. They're located in Nashville, Hendersonville, Gallatin, Athens, Madisonville, Sweetwater, Etowah, and in Cleveland at 950 25th Street and 3855 North Ocoee Street. I've used them. I like them. Give them a try. They're no problem. So, you're like a business that you can't control what comes in or
That's right.
what goes out, or I mean, how do you do that?
You know, I think my business, in terms of volume, is generated almost exclusively by other people. First, it's generated by people who break the law, and then it's generated by law enforcement who work the cases, make an arrest, and bring us a case. And then it's directed by judges and juries and victims and timetables. And we have a lot to do in it, don't get me wrong. We have the ability to push, but it's rare. The only way that I can say, look at somebody and say, we're not going to take your case, really, is if there's a legal or a factual problem. Otherwise, we have to move on it, and we have to do it. And I don't know what the numbers will show for this last year, but we average touching in General Sessions Court across 4 counties about 28,000 cases.
Golly, let me wrap my head around that. That's 4 counties.
28,000.
28,000.
And that's been pretty consistent for, gosh, anywhere from 24 to 28,000 has been pretty consistent for years. And those are everything from speeding tickets that don't get resolved to first-degree murder.
It's still a thing.
It's something you have to touch. In criminal court, we've tried to resolve and keep our numbers lower, but we'll still indict 4,000 cases in a year, 3,000 cases in a year. The goal is to obviously finish more than you indict. Some years you can do that, some years you can't. The COVID years, they're just anomalies. You can't look at those, although I'm really proud of the staff. They, despite the fact that people kept doing things and they kept having to deal with things, they closed 2,500 cases without having juries available to them, without having the ability to do anything hardly except a plea. And so they had to work their cases really hard. But I tell every assistant that I hire, I say, if you're going to come to work here, then I want you to understand what life's going to be like. It's sort of like being staked at the edge of the ocean. You better like waves, because every day you're going to get a new set of waves. And some days they're going to be high and they'll be crashing, they'll be storming. Some days they're going to be low and they're going to be, you can float on them. Some days they're going to be ones you can play in that you know. But they're always going to be waves. And it doesn't ever stop, because people don't stop breaking the law. And so before you come here, understand there's not going to be a day when you look at your filing cabinet or you look at your desk and you go, I'm finished. Because I promise you there's another grand jury coming out. And there's another group of sessions cases you're going to have to handle.
And somebody's breaking the law right now.
Even as we speak, somewhere.
Before you got this job, do you have a new respect for the position?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, are you like the guy you take over from? Are you like, I apologize, man, it was tough?
You know, I absolutely do have a different level of respect for the job. When I was an assistant DA, I watched Jerry Estes, who was my boss, how he did the job. And in many ways, Jerry made it look pretty easy from my perspective as an assistant DA. And then I left for those 8 years after I ran and lost. And I watched Steve Bebb. And I made a promise to him and to myself after the election. Steve and I remained friends after the election, after he won, that I would never be publicly critical of him, because I knew that at the end of the day, the only person that really knows if you've done a good job and the only person that knows if you've really done it right is you. Because there's so many things that we can't tell the public. There's so many things, we make decisions based upon things that we can't tell people about. We may make a decision in a case that somebody says, I don't understand why you let somebody go on that lenient a sentence. They don't realize that I've got a brand new patrol officer who messed something up, that I don't want him to take fall over. I don't want him to suffer ridicule. I don't want his confidence to be. I want to handle it and I want to teach him, but I can't get what he might expect in a regular case. So when we look at all those things, we put all those things together, my respect for the job is that I know how hard it is just to make decisions and keep your calendar. I had no idea how many people needed and wanted part of your time. Most every morning starts with a meeting somehow, whether it's a breakfast meeting with somebody or now a Zoom meeting with somebody or a teleconference with somebody. And I've learned that the hardest thing about this job is managing your time. The first year was just brutal because I was trying to do everything. And I learned you can't do everything. And when I look around, there are guys that I serve with who have been doing it for 30 years, 40 years. And I look at the way they manage, how they've learned to completely master their calendars, master the way they handle the office. I'm just amazed at them. But the respect that I have for it is I know how hard that job is. I know how hard the decisions are that you make. Some of them are personnel decisions. Some of them are decisions on cases. Some of them are decisions about where you're going to put your resources.
Soap in the bathroom.
Absolutely.
I mean, it goes that deep, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I have Mihai Scott is my administrative assistant, and she is remarkable. I mean, she is outstanding, and she keeps so much of the day-to-day things within the office running and those things, determining those things.
Yeah.
But she comes to me for those decisions. She'll say, hey, I want to change this. What do you think? It's going to cost this. And those little things, while I was in business and I made those decisions, there were 3 lawyers and there were 6 support, or a total of 6 or 7 of us, depending upon when we're talking about. Well, now I've got a staff of basically 30. The budget is well over $2 million. And you're maintaining those 26,000 sessions cases, those 4,000 cases, and then you're making sure that there are paper towels in the dispensary.
Yeah.
You have somebody retire, you're planning their retirement party.
God.
You're doing those things, and Mihai takes a lot of that off, and Sherry Taylor and Paul Moyle, my 2 lead assistant DAs, are remarkable in taking things off of me as well. And I don't want to suggest for 1 minute that, but at the end of the day, most decisions come down to me, and so I have a profound respect for everybody that has come before me. We have 50 years of living DAs now. Richard Fisher, Jerry Estes, Steve Bebb, and me. And it goes back to 1972. And so we now have 50 years of living DAs. There have been 25 DAs in our district over the history of the district. And 5 of them are still alive, or 4 of them are still alive.
Would they all say, none of them would be critical of decisions because they know? When I see somebody build a house and somebody says, oh, Dee, should they have done that? I say, man, I don't know what the situation was. I don't know what the budget was. I don't know what the customer wanted. I don't know what the circumstances were.
Right.
It looks good to me.
Well, and I think that's right. I am very hesitant to look around at the other 30 DAs that serve with me because I do know that. I know there are plenty of times when I think nobody's going to understand why we're going to have to do this, but this is what we're going to have to do. And sometimes that's a result of we're going to charge somebody with a crime, and sometimes it's not. But I think you're absolutely right. I don't recall, and I don't recall hearing any criticism from my predecessors that was significant. We all may disagree. But everybody does understand what this job is every day. The very first week that we went, after I was elected, they had an orientation for the 12 new DAs from across the state. And so they came in, and they had these other elected DAs who would teach us. They had the people tell us how to work our budgets and all these things, and it was really intense for about a week. And Gus Radford came in. He was a DA from over in Middle Tennessee, and he stood up and he said, I'm going to start this. He was the very first speaker. He said, I'm going to start this by giving you a really cold, hard truth. Starting September 1st, every day, you're going to make a decision that could end both your legal and political career. And if you're not ready to do that, you shouldn't put your name on the ballot.
But you're here.
But you're here. So every day, be prepared for a decision that could end your legal or your political careers or both. And that, of course, that was one of those look to your right, look to your left, only one of you'll be here at the end of the year, kind of thing. And we talked about that night at dinner, and I don't think any of us really had seen it from that perspective. We had all said, we want to get in here, we want to fight for justice, and we want to move the cases, and that's so easy to talk about. It's so easy to talk about, I want to move the cases, and I want to get in here and do justice. Well, the real question is, when you get there, what is justice? And the real question is, how do I speed up something that takes this long? I can't make the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation test things faster. Tests take as long as they take.
The email may go to spam.
That's exactly right. So when you look at those things, once you get into the position and you realize in some ways how much control you have, but in some ways how little control you have, it really does take you back and say, wow, these guys are doing have done remarkable things. These guys around me are doing remarkable things. And you do develop a new level of respect, but also I think it makes you want to be better, because you realize you see these other people and you see what they're doing and you think, I want to be like them. I want to be better than them. And I don't know how you measure competition in my business. I don't know if there's a way.
You couldn't, because it's just different.
That's right. But I know that I want people to see our office and think, that may be the best office in the state. They may do this better than anybody I've seen in the state. And that's everything from how we purchase paper towels to how we handle things in general sessions. And I don't think you should ever quit experimenting. We experimented by changing completely the makeup of our office and dividing us into divisions, one in Sessions Court and one in Criminal Court. And I really think that might have worked, but COVID then came in and there was no way to maintain it. So we went back to the same model we had. And there's some very good benefits doing things we do. But I say that to say, that was one of those decisions that I sat up several nights thinking, is this the right thing to do? How is this going to affect this? Looking down the road. Now, let's go back to what we very first talked about. This is something I can't just run into the line and react to. I've got 15 lawyers that are depending upon me to make the right call here. And so when you do those things and you're faced with those kinds of decisions, again, I don't know that there's anything about that decision that could have ended my legal or political career. I mean, I suppose if I boogered the caseload up enough, it probably could have. But it gives you a profound, not just respect, but intention to be as good as the people who were before you, or better than the people before you, and certainly as good as the people around you then.
But did you say 28,000? Mm-hmm. Golly.
That's an average of what we'll deal with.
Well, let's just say 25,000.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That's 2,000 a month.
Yes.
That's incredible.
And those counts, each one of those represents a certain amount of work that an assistant DA has to do.
And a certain amount of somebody's, maybe they're not guilty too.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's those.
Absolutely. Well, and I tell people all the time, and I've told the General Assembly this, if you want to cut down on what you perceive as the number of innocent people who are charged or innocent people who are prosecuted, the first place to start is by getting more assistant DAs. Give my assistant DAs more time with each level of the caseload to look at it and fully say. Now, I'm not suggesting we need 30 instead of 15, and it's much worse in other places. We're pretty blessed here. We're not too far off what we need in terms of personnel.
You have 15
lawyers, and then another 13 support staff. We frankly are lower. We need more support staff than we do lawyers, and that's true across the state.
It's true in my business.
Absolutely.
More Indians and less chiefs.
That's right. And And so the way that somebody figures out there's something wrong with a case is because they have time to dig into it. Just like this, for you to find something wrong with one of the blueprints over here, you got to spend time digging into it, knowing what that site looks like, figuring out those two things. Well, the same thing's true with a lawyer, with an assistant DA. They look at this case, the facts being the lay of the land and the law being their blueprint, and they look at how those two match up, and it just takes time. That is something that as a manager, you want to make sure that you instill in them that, hey, do this on the front end. Make sure that you don't just pass something on because you think I'm going to deal with it another day, because you're talking about somebody's freedom. Whether they've been charged 100 times or 0 times, every time you initiate something to take somebody's liberty, you've imposed the greatest power that government has. Money is money, and government can take our money. I can make more money. You can get more money. You can never get a single second back if the government takes it from you wrongly. And that's a prosecutor's worst fear, or it should be. It should be the thing that on those close cases they spend the most time worrying about.
More so, that would be what would worry me more than letting somebody go, that, unless it was rape or murder.
Sure.
Besides those things, the other would just worry me to death.
It is the thing you worry about. Now, thankfully, in 97, 96, 95% of your cases, it's pretty clear cut. Those other 3 are the ones where you really need to be sure, but they're also where our jury trials come from, because they're the ones where they say, I'm not guilty, and you say, well, I think you are. I keep track of what we do in criminal court that way, not because I think the people ought to know that we're doing a good job. I don't ever want a lawyer to be afraid to try a case, and I tell them that. I say, look, I want your trial conviction percentage to be somewhere in the 80s. I want you to be able to take a case that you think is on the edge and let 12 people in this community decide if they think it's right or wrong. Don't you make all those decisions. Some of those the people need to make.
That's a good point. Of course, that takes more of your time. You have to prepare it now.
It does. It does. But it means, but that's what we do. That's what we're supposed to do. And so we've maintained, since I've come in, we've steadily gotten that number to where I wanted it to be. And I've told them, I don't ever expect 100% from you. 100% means you're either picking and choosing way too many, just cherry picking your cases, or you're not trying anything. The old, you ain't been throwed, you ain't never rode.
Right.
I see these people on television, 100-0 in murder trials, and I've never lost a case. Well, I'm sorry, I don't have any respect for that. I just don't.
It can't be that.
Because there had to be a hard case where you knew somebody was guilty, and you thought, I'm not sure if a jury will, if I can explain this to a jury so that they understand what I understand. And if you're not willing to take that chance, you're really not being a guardian of public safety. You're checking boxes for a resume. And I don't want lawyers like that. I want lawyers who first enjoy trying cases. I mean, that's what we do. Every day we get up and we're warriors. We're supposed to be in battle. I want them to enjoy trial work, but I also want them to know that there are decisions that shouldn't be made by us. There are decisions that a community has to come together and say, as a collective, through 12 people, this is wrong. Or you know what? We don't think this is wrong. I don't ever publicly criticize a jury for that, because that's their job. My job's to tell them about it. Their job's to make the decision.
You're almost a reporter at that point.
Very much so. An advocate, a reporter, something. It's somewhere in between the hard news, the 6 o'clock news hour, and the Tucker Carlson show. It's somewhere between opinion.
Yeah.
You know, and getting those two things together is a hard job for an assistant DA or any lawyer to master. But that's what you do, and then you leave it to those 12 people who are every jury. Now, I've had juries that I disagreed with violently. I mean, I just thought, how were you in the same room I was in? But I've always respected it, because at the end of the day, they come in with no bias, or they should. They come in with no preconceived notion. They just listen to it and they say, do I want this going on in my community or not? And is this what I expect? And then they make a decision.
And that's all you can do from your end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's all we should ever do. Same thing with the grand jury. I tell my folks and I preach to them, look, we don't want to pressure a grand jury to indict something only to get our teeth kicked in by a jury when we try it. Figure out before it goes to the grand jury if it's something we need to get there or not. Now, if it's close and you believe in it, then let's go. I'm behind you 100%. We'll try it. We'll let it all hang out, and whatever happens, happens. But if you know it's a loser, don't just pass it up so that you can get it off your desk for today. When I came into office, excuse me, I had there was a rule that had been here forever that law enforcement officers had to get case files to us within 30 days. And that just been the rule forever, after it was bound over from the grand jury. And then once it was, then we had to get it in the next grand jury. I mean, well, what happened was, between court schedules and law enforcement working their shifts, that delayed things. And so when I came in, I said, look, I'd much rather us get it right than get it fast. I want us to get it right. So I took that away. I mean, it's my prerogative. It was the prerogative of the DA, when something's presented. So I said, let's slow down. Let's take a step back. I want you to talk to the victim. I want you to talk to the law enforcement officer. I want you to understand the case. I want you to research the law if you need to. I want you to make sure you have all the witnesses lined up, that they're all still alive, that you know where they are. Then I want to make sure that you correctly draft an indictment that's done right. Then I want you to look into this defendant's background, and I want you, if we have to file a notice that they've got other crimes that we're going to use, I want that filed on the day that they're arraigned. I want an offer made to them on the day that they're arraigned, that's approved by both the victim and law enforcement. That's my rule. And so I said, the only way I can make that happen is by getting rid of this arbitrary 30 days. And it's worked pretty well. Is it perfect? No, because their cases are like people. They have lives. They bloom and they develop and they change. But it's greatly, in my opinion, it's greatly changed the way cases are indicted and what happens afterwards. We're indicting fewer cases than the previous administration did, but we're dismissing fewer cases than the previous administration did, and that's because we're getting them on the front end. I think you do a disservice if you make law enforcement continue to work on a case that you know is not going to make it, and you hold victims' hopes open, settle it, be done with it, get it done, move on. And so as I've gone through the last 8 years, that's sort of been that focus in that pre-trial time. I don't care what your number is out here. I mean, I want it to be professional, and like I said, I want it to be in the 80s. I want you to win 4 out of 5 cases you try. If you win 5 out of 5 and you're trying everything coming and going, fantastic. I'm proud of you. But I want you to be professional. I want you to be competent. I want you to do things well. But I also never want you to be afraid to take up the sword for the people who pay your salary and step into a courtroom and take a chance on getting beat, but knowing you're in there doing the right thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around $2,500 a month between 15 assistant DAs. That's other counties. We're not,
that's 4 counties altogether.
I mean, that would be a little more convenient in Cleveland, but
yes.
They have to drive to, what are the 4 counties?
Well, it's Bradley, McMinn, Monroe, and Polk counties. And I have offices in Bradley, McMinn, and Monroe. So I have offices in 3. I have lawyers stationed.
How often do you have to go to those offices?
It just varies.
Once a week or every 2 weeks? Or?
Usually I'm in one every couple of weeks. It just depends.
Do you have a desk at each place?
I don't, because I wanted to give staff the most available. And frankly, most of my work happens in Cleveland. And really for 3 or 4 years, we've been conducting a lot of business by Teams or Skype back in the day before Teams. Because just to save the public money. Anytime I can visualize somebody, see their face, and meet with them and not have to charge mileage to the people of the state, it saves the people money.
And it saves time, let's face it.
It does. It saves, well, for me to drive to Madisonville is about 50 minutes from Cleveland. For me to drive to Athens, 35.
And if there's nothing really to do, what's the point?
Well, that's right. And I don't drive just to go up there. I think if you talk to my assistants, they'll find I'm immediately available by text or call or
So these 15 assistants, they're in all these counties. It's
Yes.
not just 15 here.
That's right. That's right. I have them split up in those 3 counties. Each of those offices, I reopened the Madisonville office. When I came in, there was not a Madisonville office, so those folks had to drive to either to Athens or to Cleveland to meet with us. I just didn't think that was fair, so I immediately, as I promised it when I ran, I did it. We reopened the same office, and I put 2 lawyers. And it was the first time we'd ever had more than 1 lawyer in that office. A victim witness coordinator we had in that office so that they can meet and talk with victims. And then a secretary. So we were a full service office in Madisonville. And that's made a huge difference in the way our cases are done up there. It's important to have a presence in each one of those counties, in my opinion. If for no other reason, it sends a message that we really do care about what's going on in this community.
That's what I would think. If you didn't have a presence there, you'd almost think that you were just focused on Bradley County or
That's
something.
Right. That's right.
And
you can't do that.
And Bradley County is the biggest one.
Mm-hmm.
But now let me ask you this: do you think? Do all the counties? Is there? You said there was 30 district attorneys in the state of Tennessee.
There's 31, including me, and there'll be 32 in September because they create a new judicial district.
Because of population or something?
Well, no.
Because of
Lewis, Perry, and Hickman counties were connected to Williamson, and they could never get anybody elected because people in Franklin, Cool Springs, that's who got elected. So they wanted their own judicial district. So we now have a judicial district that's only 48,000 people in 3 counties, or roughly that. We'll say 50, I guess.
Now,
But yes, there'll be 32 of us.
now Tennessee is under the civil law, right? Is that what they call it? Civil law or no? What is it? Not Commonwealth.
No, that's right. We're under both the statutory and of course we do have some forms of common law that make their way out through judicial decisions, but most everything we have is statutory.
When you hear these on TV, you'll say so and so from the Commonwealth of. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
It's just a different form of a governing body.
Where is it? Commonwealth of
Kentucky, I believe, is a Commonwealth. Massachusetts may be as well.
You know, Gwen?
Rhode Island.
So
I'm sure some of those.
I don't understand. I've often wondered. The only reason I remember is Miss America pageant. So say so and so from the Commonwealth of.
Right. You know, when you talk to your, and one of the good things about my job is that I get to interact with a lot of DAs from across the country. No matter what they're called, we all pretty much work the same way.
So you're saying it's about the same?
It's about the same. Anywhere you go, you're going to have different rules. People have different priorities. They have things that work different ways. But
I wouldn't notice any difference.
No. I mean, you might notice a difference, but not in the overall scheme of things, I don't think.
What about from like what a DA in Williamson, or not Williamson, but let's say somewhere farther away here, would we operate different than them? Because, I mean, you wouldn't really have a law here about people surfing,
right?
Because we're not in California. Right. So there would be some differences between Memphis and here in Kingston, I guess.
Absolutely, there would be, because every community has its own set of problems, its own set of challenges with the criminal law and the criminal element. Mm. You know, crime is everywhere. I mean, there's no place that there isn't crime. But, for example, Shelby County, Amy Wyrick is the DA out there, and she made the decision she was not going to prosecute driving on revoked license cases that didn't involve a DUI, just people who not paid for a speeding ticket. Yeah. She made the decision she was not going to do that. When they did that, it ended up in removing 200,000 cases from her active docket in Shelby County.
She's a genius.
Well, that's right. You look at the 26, you're talking about the 26,000 that we have.
Right.
That's everything. She had 200,000 that was just that.
Golly, she had to.
And so the scale, going back to the economy of scale, they had to deal with those in a way, and that was the way they chose to deal with them. They're going to handle the serious ones. They're going to handle the ones that are problematic, but they
Right.
just can't. So I think you would see that. If you go to Polk County, now here's a great example within my judicial district, obviously very different than Shelby County. We have people there who violate the rules of the National Forest that end up getting cited in. The Shelby County basically does, I mean, they may have it, but they don't have it nearly like we do. And so every community, if you went different places,
That's a good example.
you would see different charges. You would see you might see fewer drug charges and more hunting over a baited field
Yeah.
charges. But you're going to see the same kinds of things, you know?
Yeah.
You're going to see the same, and you're going to see all around the state, most judges operate sort of the same. They don't have to, but the law imposes a certain sort of standardization on things. But kind of like you building a house. The building code's going to say you've got to have X, Y, and Z. But then you can make the exterior look however you want to. Well, that's kind of how our judges work.
Yeah.
There are certain things the law requires them to do. But then they can make their court work in a way that works for them, works for their clerks, works for the people in their community.
Now, if they wanted to prosecute those and to the fullest extent of the law, and add another thing that's a crime, then nobody would move to Shelbyville. So maybe the public overall has a say so over time in what the rules are.
Sure.
Such as with this new thing with, mushrooms are becoming psychedelics are becoming more of a trend, and me and you'll be dead before they accept
Right.
that here.
Right.
But maybe the masses do just determine what the laws are and what's right and what's wrong and what needs to be, because you can only prosecute so much.
Certainly. Every year the General Assembly adds stuff. Every year they make things, a great example, one that's close, I think, to many people's heart around here is Joker's Law.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But that is a great example of a community saying, this is what the law ought to be.
That's what I was saying.
This is what the law ought to be, and this is what we think the punishment ought to be for that. Now, once that happens, once it gets said and once it gets passed, what the courts do with that, how the 31 or 32 of us
Implement
implement
it.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, what a jury would do with the case. I mean, one
Yeah.
of the things that people just sort of, I think, many times think that that juries are just in there waiting for us to give them the magic word and then they're going to convict. That is not the case. That they are not like that, and so juries bring every bit of collective common sense that a community has to a case, and so they may view a case very differently than the set of folks who push to have a law passed. And so, but overall, the community gets to determine what's.
Well,
justice
that
looks like.
goes back to that's what goes back for the point of a jury trial. They're supposed to add common sense, the majority, a broad view of the population.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're not going to have people from Indiana serving on a Bradley County
Right.
jury.
Right, jury of your peers.
A
People
jury,
live
that's
with
right,
you.
jury of your peers.
And I've been watching jurors for 29 years now almost. I've been practicing law 29 years almost. And I have watched juries that I thought were incredibly intuitive. They were able to make really hard connections but come to a right conclusion. And then I've seen juries ignore what were obvious conclusions. And that goes back to, at some point in time, the human mind makes a decision about what they think is actually right. No matter what they say about following the law, their perception of the law is colored by what they think is right.
Cognitive dissonance, we're going to
Yes,
say.
absolutely. And I'll tell you, this is exactly what I'll tell you a story on myself. I was a young prosecutor, tried a burglary case to a jury. I'd probably been an assistant DA maybe maybe 2 years. It hadn't been long. I had not been in the office long. And so this was one of those cases where it's one of the few cases where we had fingerprints and we had possession of some of the stuff that was stolen out of the house. So I felt really good about this case. And, at that point, I'd not tried all that many cases. I mean, I tried a few, but I hadn't tried that many cases. And so I try this case and I go through it and I go to the closing argument and I give what I think is just a remarkable closing argument for 10, 15 minutes,
Yeah.
whatever. Jury wanders out. I'm sitting there, thinking this is going to be fine. They come
Slam
back,
dunk.
not guilty. and so I sit around, I chit chat with the court officer a while, and I'm trying to figure out what happened. We're talking, and so as I'm walking out, one of the jurors they'd gone to the bathroom, and we're coming down, and we were walking down together, and it was the lady. She was probably in her late 60s, early 70s. And she said, "Oh, young man, you did such a good job today." And I said, "Well, I appreciate that." I said, "I'd like to have done a better job, obviously." She laughed, and I said, "If you don't mind me asking, why did y'all, what was it that was important that made you all say, this is a not guilty case?" She said, "Well, we got back there and talked about it." And she said, "We figured if it took you 10 to 15 minutes to explain why he was guilty, he probably wasn't." So, what a jury takes back into that room, that's just common sense. I don't know, if you can't get it to me that quickly, then.
I haven't thought of that, but she may be right on the money. Maybe that's part of it, is not overselling. That's that's like overselling something.
Going back to what we talked about again at the very beginning, I learned from that, and I learned I don't want to get too lengthy with this. Be short, be sweet, and then sit down.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. And I think there's something to that, but a jury brings all that in. They look back through their whole life, and they come to experiences that they've had that have nothing to do with the law. And then they apply that, what they believe is common sense. And I think most of the time they get it right. I mean, there are times, again, I've disagreed with it, but the vast majority of the time, I think our juries are
if
smart.
If you had 50 jurors,
Mm-hmm.
have you ever heard that theory, and I don't even know what it's called, but they say that if a lot of people got together and guessed, that the group, the average of the group's thinking will be the right answer. Like if you had 1,000 people guessing the jelly beans in the jar, that the average would be the correct answer.
I could see that being correct. And that's probably the reason, in Tennessee, we've never gone to a 6-juror panel. Some states, you can be convicted of 6 jurors.
That would scare me to death.
And of course, we stay with 12, constitutional 12.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what, when I say constitutional, that's what we have. But other places do 6, and
Some
a lot of civil juries are 6 in other parts of the country, I think.
I could see maybe that, but now in the civil, they do the what do they call that? Balance of probability versus what you do is proof of beyond.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well,
So it's to
different
me,
standards of proof.
to me that should be flipped.
Really?
Yeah, because on a civil case, you're talking about money and I mean, it should maybe not flip, but it should be the same.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between proof of balance of probability? Like,
Yeah.
well, it's like say I'm out there and somebody says your dog bit me.
Right.
Well, I'm going to sue you for
Right.
$1 million.
Right.
And nobody's there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so well, the odds are that he did bite him. Well, probably, but we can't give him $1 million because that probably happened,
Right.
or it was possible.
Sure.
So I don't know.
Well, and I think, again, those are historical. Those burdens of proof. The one that we talk about in ours is the jury's instructed that it's to a moral certainty. They talk that they need to come back and they need to decide as a moral certainty. And I think it is Judge Ross, but I'm not sure. Some judge that I've tried cases in front of used to say that it's the kind of decision that at the end of the day, the next morning when you're standing in front of the mirror shaving, you think I did the right thing. We did exactly what we should have. So, and listen, the cases, I've seen lots of cases that I thought certainly may have gotten their 51% that they only needed for the civil verdict, but it sure seemed like the kind of case where more should have been needed.
That could be simply their representation.
Why, sure.
You ever watch The Trial by Franz Kafka? Did you ever read that book?
I have not. It was one of those things, and lots of folks did in school, but I didn't.
You should really read it. It's really good. It's almost comical, but it's so spot on to the way the mind works when it comes to criminal defense. We don't even do it the way they did it. I think it was in Ireland, but just the way the mind works. But now let's say it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you've had it up to here, and you can't take any more. Where do you go? You escape somewhere? You take 5 minutes to go to the mountains? Do you drive to?
Usually when I get to that point, I'll go find one of my other assistants, and we'll talk about something other than whatever it is I'm dealing with. And it may be one of their cases, it may be something else. I did not do myself or, frankly, my family or anybody else any good because I didn't take much time off my first 4 years in office.
Are you a workaholic?
I can be. I am less now than I was because I've learned, well, for one thing, my body doesn't handle it the way it did. I mean, I'm mid-50s now, and I can't work the way I did when I was 40.
What's the difference?
When fatigue sets in, when my thinking gets to the point where I think I've got to step away from something. When I was in my 40s, I could stay up all night, I could work all night, I could get up the next day and I could go. And I can still do that, but I feel it a lot more. I look at my decision-making abilities, and I realize that I need to step away from things. And I'm not saying I make worse decisions now than I did then. I probably make better decisions now than I did then. But it's just a different approach. But when I get just worn out, when I've had all I can have for a day, I try not to leave the office because I don't want to see the staff. I don't want the staff to see me do that.
On the courthouse square at 30 2nd Street is the law firm of Logan Thompson Law. Since 1965, they have served the legal needs for the good citizens of Cleveland-Bradley County. If you've got a problem, they're no problem. Give them a call. Now, I see you a lot of times at Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
On Inman, do you not go to this other one?
I just come out of the house and go to the one on Inman. That's the one I go to when I go.
That is, are you addicted to their coffee too?
I really like it. My wife and I have coffee every morning, but then either on the way in or depending upon what I've got going that day, if I'm headed to the court or something, I'll get it on my way to court sometime.
So you have coffee at the house before you go.
Mm-hmm.
What time do you get up usually?
It just varies, but I'm always up by 7. I never am asleep past 7.
You a shower in the morning guy or shower at night?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, but nobody wants to see me if I've not showered. Nobody wants to see me if I've not showered.
So you drink. So on the way in, you stop. Do you stand in line or do you do the app?
Up until COVID, I went in and stood in line because I love talking to everybody behind the bar.
That's the way I did.
When they quit doing it, I just got to the mobile. But I still go in and I try to chit chat with them as much as I can, but I don't ever stand in line anymore.
You ever notice that little jacket they have on the outside will cover your name up, and you don't know if it's yours or not?
Yes.
And I always feel like, well, if I push it down and it's not mine,
Yeah.
so I try to see the top of the.
Of the letters.
Looks like they would put that at the top, especially because of COVID, because that's why they're doing it, so you don't touch it, but yet they're covering. I mean, think about it. They started that because of COVID, so they put your name on it, so you can do it online, but then they cover it up, so now you're touching it anyway. You know, they put something in their coffee that is different.
I agree.
And now everybody that's listening will say, some people say, well, I don't like their coffee. I didn't either the first 3 times. But after you've drunk it about 4 times, it's got to be worse than cocaine.
I'll tell you a funny story about it. I swore it off for years. I mean, for years I said, I'm not paying that. I'm not going there. I'm doing that.
I'm just like you.
And then my youngest daughter, for Christmas several years ago, bought me the January mug.
I'm the exact same way. Go ahead.
And I went in and I thought, well, she's giving me this present, so I'm going to use it. And that, I've never looked back. I've gotten used to it. It's something now that every day, virtually every day, starts with. And sometimes I'll go with hot tea. Sometimes I'll do a lemonade or something. But every morning, that's where the day.
What size do you get?
Venti.
That's the top. That's the large, right?
And I'll drink on it about all morning.
I get the grande. What do you do with that little sword they put in? Well, I've got stacks of swords.
I used to, and I threw a bunch of them out. I tried to tell them, and I've told them, I said, don't put those in there. I don't ever. All I'm doing is literally throwing them away, and they're living 15 seconds. And so lots of times the ones that really still know me won't do it. But I was just like you. I had a place in the side of my Jeep, and I probably had 50 of them in there at one time, and every time I would clean it out, I'd clean it.
I've got ADD or OCD or whatever the thing is.
All the Ds?
All the Ds. And so I put them in my console, and when I get a stack that big, I put them on the windowsill at the office. I've got them in there, 2 cups full, because one day they'll come out and say, oh, here's what you do with your... I even Googled it one time, what to do with extra swords.
Really?
There's no
answer.
No explanation, but there's got to be something, because it's... Now, if you go to Laster's, theirs is like that long.
Right.
And, you can swallow it.
Right.
But
well, it's funny that you've saved those and you're trying to figure out what to do with them. That's what my dad did with margarine bowls. My dad, when he died,
those are good bowls.
Oh, I bet we had 500 of those things. I mean, there were decades of margarine bowls in there. And I asked Mom, I said, what in the world was he? And she said, he always said, of course, he was a child of the Depression. He was a child that grew up on a sharecropping on a farm in Polk County. Nothing was wasted. And she said, he always said, there might be a use for it. And I don't know if there will be, but I'll have it if I need it. And he was the same way about every screw and every bolt and everything. So I totally understand hanging on to those thinking, I wonder if there's something to do with it, because it's exactly what my dad did.
If it's not in the way, I just will keep it. I remember eating out of margarine bowls at my grandmother's. Funny you mention that.
Absolutely.
I would sit on her couch, a yellow naugahyde couch.
Yes, sir.
And eat vegetable soup out of a margarine bowl and eat toasted pimento cheese sandwich and watch Gunsmoke.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I could do that today and just be just fine with it.
Be just as happy as a lark.
But that margarine bowl, you almost had to put a plate under it because it was so hot. It didn't hold heat very well.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And if whatever you had in it was hot, don't put it on your naked leg.
No, oh boy. But there's all kinds of stuff like that. Even these plastic bottles, I can't hardly throw them away either.
Well, my dad he would keep every screw. If something we bought and he put together, it had a separate screw. He would save that one and he would catalog them and.
Like they put the package in. You may use this screw or that screw. He'd save
them because he said, I never know, I might need it. And surprisingly enough, it was amazing how many times he could go out there and find exactly what he needed.
Is he still alive?
No, he died. He died when I was in law school. He died between my second and third year in law school.
What part of Polk County?
They grew up at the McClary farm. Dad grew up on the river bottom side. The house that he was born in is still there. It's owned by a family now.
Like whereabouts exactly?
You know where the river bridge is, where the Hiwassee River Bridge is. You come down the hill and where the glider port is.
Yeah, where's about it?
All right.
Isn't that what they call Mudhead?
Yep. My dad grew up on that side, on the river bottom side, and my mother grew up on the mountain side in a field. That house is no longer there. It burned. But the house that my dad and all of his brothers and sisters were born in and lived in is still there and owned by a family that's refurbished it and redone it and made it up.
Were y'all already moved into Cleveland before when you were in high school?
Yes, absolutely. I was born here. My dad went to the Air Force. Mom went with him. Dad thought about staying in the Air Force. Mom thought he ought not stay in the Air Force, so they came back. He was going to take a job at Martin Marietta in Atlanta, and because he was an aircraft mechanic in the Air Force, and they were opening a new line to build a new airplane, and they delayed it, and so he didn't have a job. So he came back here to Cleveland, went to work for Cook's Manufacturing, and then was hired at Cleveland Chair as their shipping superintendent. Mm-hmm. And so I was born here in Cleveland, and my first house was on Jordan Avenue. That's in a little apartment. And then shortly after that, my mom and dad bought a house in Eldridge Acres off Mouse Creek Road.
Well, that's where I was raised.
Yeah.
Eldridge Acres.
Yeah.
Which Eldridge? There's West Eldridge, East Eldridge.
We're on Marley Circle. We were on Marley Circle, which is when you come around the big curve.
You go past Mr. Zip.
You turn in the right.
Okay, well, I was on the left, West Eldridge.
We were on the right.
When was you raised there?
I lived there. Well, my mom, when she died in 2014, still lived there. So we lived there the whole time from 60. See, I was born in 66, so they bought that one in 67. I think.
Hey, we was across the street.
The whole
Did you
time.
live next to Von Taylor?
I lived in that same area. The
Remember
Braziers
him?
were there.
Remember Von Taylor?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Whatever happened to him?
I don't know.
Boy, he was cool, wasn't he?
He was a good fella. Good fella.
He was the first guy that smoked.
I was trying to...
So you mean to tell me, did you go to North Lee?
Yeah, sure did. Billy Jones was my first grade teacher at North Lee.
So you're behind me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know.
I'm 60. I was born in 65.
Well, I was born in 66. And because my birthday fell on October 1st, I didn't get into school with all my regular. So I'm actually probably 2 years behind you in school.
Yeah.
Because you remember back then, if you weren't 6 by September 30th, you didn't get to go to school.
That explains it because, boy, that was a rough neighborhood, wasn't it? I mean, just to be honest.
At times.
Do you remember Earl Wiseman?
Yes. Yes.
Let me tell you this story. Earl was, he was rough,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember it was one of those Sunday mornings where Monday mornings I was running to catch the bus, and my tennis shoes had gotten wet the Sunday, so I couldn't wear them. Mm-hmm. So I had to wear my church shoes to third grade, which is very, very bad.
Absolutely.
So I ran and got on the bus. This is the first guy that taught me that you don't always have to worry. But I got on the bus and I sat down beside Earl. He always liked me. He was mean as a striped snake. But he liked me for some reason. And I sat beside him and I said, "Oh man, I forgot my Valentine's. It was Valentine's Day. You know how you just take the pack?"
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And he looked at me and said, "Man, I don't ever take Valentine's." So I thought, you don't have to take your Valentine's. Right. And it didn't matter that I was wearing my Sunday shoes.
Right.
I never will. Why is that I remember that?
It's funny how things we remember like that.
You remember Charlie Yoder?
I know the name.
They lived in West Eldridge.
And he ended up going to Cleveland, right?
That was a mixed bag.
Most of my friends went to Cleveland when Ross was built, but I stayed at North Lee.
I was the first one in the first class at E.O. Ross.
Okay. So
in 6th grade.
okay,
So you would have gone there
gosh,
in the 4th grade,
yeah,
I guess.
yeah,
My brother Bo, he might have been in your class.
he might have been.
Do you remember Mr. Finley, the librarian at
Oh, yeah.
E.O. Ross?
Well, I know who he is. I didn't remember from being there, but I knew who he was.
He's still alive.
Is he really?
Yep.
You know, it's funny that you were talking about that. The very first job I had was in that neighborhood. It was Mr. Lee, who lived on the corner there. You come around the big curve. Instead of turning right where I live, you turned left.
That's like going to my
And
house.
he had that corner lot. And
It
he
was
had a ranch house with a fence.
a nice house.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ranch house with a chain link fence.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was a teacher at North Lee, and or a teacher at Bradley Jr. I don't remember where he taught now. He was my teacher. Anyway, Mom and Dad said, we want you to have a job this summer. And you don't have to have it as long as you do well in school. We're going to have things for you to do around here, but during the summer, we want you to do something. Spring to fall, you're going to do something. All right. So I started mowing, and you were talking about how you can remember things like that. To this day, I can remember feeling the wet grass when I would weed eat along that fence, because I'd get up and try to get it done in the morning before it got too hot.
It was hot over in West Eldridge.
Oh mercy! But I can remember that. I can remember that spray. To this day, I can remember
Why
that spray.
is that?
I think it's just things that collect our attention. It's something that, and sometimes I may not have thought about something for 50 years, and it'll come back to me, and it'll be just as clear as if I was standing there doing it. Which is the oddest thing, because I can't remember sometimes what I had for breakfast day before yesterday.
Sometimes you get a smell and you think,
oh, absolutely.
oh man.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's bad feeling.
Absolutely.
But back to West Eldridge. That was during the era of Kiss. Remember Kiss?
Oh,
the
yeah.
baseball, the Kiss cards. You'd go to Mr.
Absolutely.
Did you ever walk to Mr. Zips?
Oh yeah, and rode my bike there all the time too, with my flag.
Yeah, that was so cars could see you.
Oh, absolutely.
I didn't realize that.
I just
I
thought
thought
it
it
was
was
kinda
just kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I wonder whatever happened to Von Taylor.
I don't know. So many people that I went to school with.
I had no idea you were in that neighborhood.
Yeah. So many. I lived a couple doors up from the Braziers and the Coppingers.
Coppinger's Amy?
From Amy Coppinger, and then
I think she lives over near Lee
and then
Coppinger.
Buffy Brazier and her brothers, and then the Lucchese's. Do you remember the Lucchese's?
Do I? Yeah.
All right. So John and what was his sister's name? Lucchese.
I know. It was John, the daddy's
Yes.
daughter.
Yes.
She's my age.
Well, they lived literally next door to us. They were our next door neighbors. So that'll give you some idea of where we were there. But I think I look back, and as we've sat here and talked to me, and I see Buffy lives around here, and so she and I run into her every so often. I've not seen Amy Coppinger in I don't know how long, and I've not seen the Lucchese's probably since they moved out of the neighborhood, and it makes me kind of wonder where they are. What happened.
Well, I went to a party 10 years ago, and it was one of these parties where they park your car.
Okay.
And so they had one of these Kiwanis clubs or something.
Yeah.
Came out, and they were parking for tips for the club.
Mm-hmm.
And I handed my keys, and it was John Lucchese. He had one of
Oh,
them hats on. He was always real friendly to me.
Good guy. He was a great kid to grow up next to. We played a lot together.
You know, I got, and I'm talking about the daddy.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Yeah, the
yeah,
daddy.
Yeah.
But I got hit. I was going down, if you go past where you turned yours and you go to the next road to the left,
Yep.
and you go the end of the road, and then you go down the hill, I got hit by a car.
Really?
Yeah, I was riding my bicycle up, and I turned the corner, and the guy threw me over into the ditch, and he walked me home. I don't remember who he was, but I bet you that guy was scared to death. But I couldn't walk for a couple of days or nothing.
Oh my goodness.
But you know, that was at that time, Mouse Creek Road ended and it was gravel the rest of the way.
Absolutely.
And Hooper Gap was just a kind of a thought.
It was. When we first moved into that house, my mom would take me for stroller rides on Mouse Creek Road.
No problem.
And she said, we might see 2 cars a week. Might. Of course, now, you're taking your life in your hands if you're not in a tank on Mouse Creek. Lots of
Do you know
times.
none of those roads have curbs? They're just asphalt.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
think about that now, but you drive through and say, where's the curbs? We didn't think a thing about that.
Mercy, no.
Remember Whitney Mantooth? He lived over
Yes,
there?
yes. And we also, we didn't think a thing about riding our bike wherever. I rode my bike plenty of times from there to Rolling Hills Golf Course.
Remember when Brad Street was, you could ride your bike over at the end of Brad Street?
absolutely.
The hill, whoever developed that must have lost their ass or something. Because it was just, there was nothing there except,
Right.
it was just fields.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, absolutely.
Those were good times. I drive by there every now and then to the old house, and I think, boy, it was the coldest house they ever built.
Really?
It was like the heat wasn't good or something. There's a lot of people that you don't realize. I had no idea. Maybe I saw you there, but I didn't think nothing about it.
Well, my daughter still lives there. My daughter still lives
In
there.
the house.
We remodeled it, and so when she went to Lee, she wanted to get out on her own, and I wanted to keep that house, so we still have it. So
You know who else lived over there? David Jenkins and Willie Jenkins.
well, now you're right. I did know that.
I rode there. We rode the bus together.
I did remember that.
Did you ride the bus to school?
I did the first 2 years, and then my mom went back to work, and so she would take me on her way into work, and then she worked for McIntyre and Associates. She worked for, first it was Cornut and McIntyre.
Cornut.
Cornut and McIntyre. And then she took time off and had me, and then she went back to worked for Claude Ogle for a long time. But she worked her schedule around what my school was so that she could drive me in the morning. She would drop me off, and then. But I liked the bus. I enjoyed riding the bus. It was fun with my friends.
I never liked the bus. I don't know why. I guess running in those wet shoes.
Well, that may have had something to do with that. One day may have turned it off forever. But after my second grade year, then she would do that.
Now, did you go to Cleveland Junior or Bradley?
I went to Bradley Junior.
Not Cleveland Junior? See, I went to Cleveland Junior.
Right, I went to North Lee, and then to Bradley Junior, and then to Bradley High School. My kids were the exact opposite. They went to Stewart, and then to Cleveland Middle, Cleveland High School.
I went to Stewart, North Lee, Stewart, E.O. Ross, Cleveland Junior, Cleveland High, and Bradley High. 7 schools.
My goodness.
And I think that's one reason I know a lot of people today, because a lot of them don't ever know I left. They just thought I was there the whole time.
In a different class. Yeah, sure.
When did you decide, hey, I want to be a lawyer?
I was already in college, really. I really thought I wanted to be a musician, to be honest with you.
What kind?
Well, I went up there to play piano and vocal.
Did you have piano lessons?
I did from the time I started when I was 5.
Well, they wouldn't have gone over in Eldridge Acres.
We didn't play very loud. But I went up there, and on some level I knew I couldn't be. I knew I didn't want to be a traveling musician. I'm a homebody. I like being home. I like being settled. And when I got up there and realized the level of talent that it takes to be, I thought, So I'd always loved history. I'd always loved politics. I always loved the law, the idea of the law. My dad had taken, one time I had gone with my dad. He had to go pay taxes or do something at the courthouse. And he took me into the courtroom and said, sit here. I want you to sit here until I come back and get you.
That's what did it.
Well, and Conrad Fennell was trying a case. And to this day, I have no idea what it was about. Don't know anything about it. I just watched these guys go back and forth. And I thought, that looks pretty interesting. Now, I'm known to have a smart mouth from time to time, so probably lawyering was good for me. So anyway, when I got to college and realized, you need to figure this out, law was a pretty easy fit after I'd gotten my head away from music. And you talked about where I like to go and get away. The two things that if I'm not at work or I'm not with people, I'm either listening to music or I'm taking pictures with a camera.
What kind of music?
It could be anything.
I mean, classical or?
It could be anything. I've got everything from 80s.
Baroque?
Baroque. I've got everything from classical music to the big frizzy-headed power bands in the 80s on my phone, and I just always loved music. And
I do too. I love music. And
there's no, there's a friend of mine in college when we graduated gave me she had actually embroidered it, and she did it for several of us we were all in a choir together. And it said, next to silence, that which comes closest to expressing the inexpressible is music.
I agree with that.
And so when my heart's really hurting, or when I am extremely happy, or just when I need a pick-me-up or a settle-me-down, it's almost always music. And I will vary it. And sometimes I'll just hit random, and just whatever comes on in whatever order, have at it. Do the whole playlist.
Do you think that they say if you can control the nation's music, you can control the nation?
I think it's probably right.
But now, music to me is if you ever notice some songs you can watch live and you say, "Oh, I know what they're saying," and then others you can't understand what they're saying unless you hear it on the radio.
Yes.
And others you have to watch the video.
That's yes.
So now, I'm a big Van Morrison fan.
Yeah.
I love Van Morrison. To me, he's the ultimate. And in fact, I'm going to see him May the 1st at Verizon Amphitheater.
Excellent.
Outdoor event.
That'll be a great event.
I mean, it's great.
It'll be great.
But he said that music, people say, well, I don't understand what the artist was saying. That's not the point. Right. You're supposed to listen and let if a true artist allows your mind to go back to weed eating on Mr. Lee's corner, or eating out of that bowl, or going to take on the world.
Absolutely.
So a true artist lets your mind go where it wants to,
that's right.
And that's his art.
That's right.
It's not what he's thinking.
No.
You ever heard somebody say, "Don't confuse the art with the artist, because
right.
you won't like him."
That's right.
Or her.
That's exactly right, because the magic, whatever the art is, whether it's music or photography or painting or sculpting or whatever it is, the impression, the reaction, the connection that the viewer makes, it's not about the artist at all.
It's nothing to do with the artist.
It's all about that connection.
Do you know, if you look up art in Webster's dictionary and to define the word art, you know what it says? Provokes thought.
That's absolutely correct.
That's all it is.
When you think about the idea of photography is to create, and the same thing is true with the hook in music, but photography, you create a subject, but your goal is to make the viewer's eye wander all over the picture, to see all the different things, every element of that picture. And it is because we connect, we remember, we understand based upon what we perceive and what we remember. And when you look at that photograph, or you listen to that piece of music, or you look at that piece of architecture, it connects with some things that are completely unconnected to a building or a photograph or whatever's in that picture. And that is the genius of an artist.
And that is a true artist.
Absolutely.
See, Van Morrison, you can't even hardly understand what he's saying.
That's right.
He mumbles so much.
That's right.
But boy, he can take my mind to those places that I want to go that are so great. Now, you know, going back to Gunsmoke, you know, most of all the background music in Gunsmoke was Baroque type music.
Sure.
And now that I understand Baroque, I can't hardly watch Gunsmoke without listening to the music. It kind of messes it up for me. But like Clint Eastwood, you know, Green Sleeves. You know that song, Green Sleeves.
Sure.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
That was. It's funny how music will take once a song takes you to a place. It's hard for you to leave that place when you hear that song again. Now that's the truth.
No, that's true. And then virtually every time you hear it, that's where you're going to be.
Now, if you wanted to really get to feeling better, and say you're driving down the road, you're out of town, and you're going to, what music is it if you want to kind of get excited?
I think there are two things. I have, one's a playlist and one's an artist. Joe Bonamassa.
Never heard of him.
He's a blues artist. He's an amazing blues artist. Oh goodness. Help me out here. Mark in the Morning. Mark.
Gwen's the artist.
He was around here. Mark Grissom.
Mark Grissom, yeah.
Mark Grissom introduced me to him years ago.
You couldn't think of Mark Grissom.
I could not think, believe it or not, of all the people in the world I can think of his name. But he got me, and so frequently when I just need a quick, let's get going for the day. But then I have a playlist that is that I call Faith Groove, and I'll constantly add new songs I hear that are songs about faith, that are Christian songs, and those will form lots of mornings going into work. Lots of days I'll start on that playlist and just pick up wherever I left off or hit at random. But you know, probably my favorite artist. Well, I hate to say that. There are just so many.
It depends on the mood.
It really does. You know, I started to say that, but it would be doing a disservice to a lot of other people who have really been important to me at different times in my life anyway.
But sometimes you just gotta have some AC/DC.
Don't you? You do. Absolutely. Some days it's just it calls for it. and music is. I think music is that way. I think. Well, it's just like food. Music's just like food. You're not in the mood for steak every day. You're not in the mood for Mexican every day. You're not in the mood for cereal every morning.
No.
And I think music is the same way with us.
Yeah, you don't eat most. I mean, it's very rare you eat breakfast for dinner.
That's right. But when you do,
it's
because you really want it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sunday nights we do Pizza Hut.
You
ever eat Pizza Hut pizza?
Oh yeah.
It's the best, isn't it?
You know, I'm always struck between it and Loopy's. I really love Loopy's too.
It's a little thick or something. I don't know.
Although I'm a big fan of their calzones. Lots of time I get their calzones.
What about, do you have to eat certain things of an evening, a night, kind of at all?
No.
It's random?
Teresa and I we'll figure it out on the weekend. Hey, what sounds good? I'm going to go to the store. I'm thinking about this. What do you think about that? And we're pretty random.
Hello, I'm Dee Burris. I want to inform you of a special election coverage we're going to have on The Discussion on May the 3rd at 6:30. I will have members of the Liars Table joining me as we watch the election unfold. Please join us Tuesday, May the 3rd on Facebook or YouTube Live. In The Discussion, it's no problem.
Now, my mom and dad were much more regimented. There's plenty of variety, but whereas we might make something 5 times in a year and it'll be a lot, that they wouldn't think anything about 5 times in a month. You know, a particular vegetable or something like that. As we've gotten older, we eat healthier, and
or do we? I don't know.
I do eat healthier than I used to, but that was a very low bar. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like I was eating like an Olympic athlete. You know, as I've gotten older, I've tried to incorporate a lot more whole grains, a lot more fruit into my diet. I used to do a lot of low carb dieting, still do some of that. But that made
doesn't
me,
work.
well, it worked fine for me until I quit.
Yeah.
And then so I've tried to do something a little different, and like I say, I'm not terribly disciplined about it, but
I read this book this guy wrote about eat right for your blood type. And his theory is that your blood type specifies what you should eat more than whether it's sugar or carbs.
right.
And I got his book and I read it, and I'm AB positive. And I'm telling you, this guy has got something.
Really?
Because it makes so much sense. I can't drink almond milk. Makes me sick. And the first line in that section on AB positive says, AB positive should not drink almond milk. And I hate bananas. I can't stay in the same room with a banana. And the second line was, you should not eat bananas.
Really?
And I'm supposed to eat red meat, whole milk, vanilla ice cream, no oranges, blueberries, strawberries. And so I really think when I stay with this guy's thinking of the do's and don'ts of my blood type, I feel the best.
It's pretty fascinating. I've not heard of that book, but it's certainly something to check out.
It is really something. And I mean, it is really, I'm not supposed to have shrimp. I'm supposed to eat hamburger meat versus, I'm supposed to eat peanut butters versus nuts because my stomach doesn't, my blood type something.
Right.
Anyway, it's really fascinating.
is.
I don't know why it's not more openly. Maybe it's.
Well, you know, it makes sense because all these diets that we talk about, all these diets really are body chemistry related. I mean,
It's got to be.
Yeah.
It's not one size fits all. It can't be.
it's not that way anything else.
But it makes a lot of sense because some people will be staying on one diet and other people just eat what they want to.
Yeah. Well, and when I was 20, you know, I could do a whole lot more to eat anything I wanted to than I can.
Did you play any sports?
I played basketball and baseball, and then I just quit growing, and both those sports outgrew me.
What position did you play baseball?
I was a first baseman.
You left-handed?
So I played first base, and then played all the outfield positions, and then because I was usually the shortest, I played guard in basketball.
Did you play at Fulbright?
I did, and then
What team?
oh gosh, I didn't play but a couple of years, and I'm trying to remember. I don't even remember. I was on the Braves for at least, well, my first 2 years actually would have been the Braves because first was a T League, the Braves T League, which was out
Coach-
at Bradley High School. We played out at Bradley High School, and then
Not Coach Palmer.
yeah, he was out there, but he was not my coach.
Oh.
He was not my coach. He was my coach in driver's ed, but
He was my teacher in driver's ed.
But then one of my favorite things that I've been able to do is I got to coach basketball at Cleveland Middle School for a while, after when I was practicing law, and that was a lot of fun. I got to coach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade girls, and I got to do it while my daughters were there. So that was a lot of fun going back to that. Had a lot more fun coaching than I did playing it really.
Do you sing at First Baptist, or is that what you're in the choir?
Yes, I've been there. We've been there at First Baptist since 1998.
Where before that?
Broad Street. Well, I'll say this. Teresa went to Broad Street. My wife went to Broad Street, and so when we got married there, and we were there for several years. But I grew up at Bellefonte Baptist. From the time I can remember till I was a junior in high school, I was at Bellefonte. And then Richie Stevenson asked me to come and be his sanctuary pianist at Calvary Baptist over on South Ocoee Street. And then I went to college. I stayed there and played with them for 2 years. I played piano for them for 2 years, and then I went to college and sang and played in several different churches when I was in college and law school. I came back home. Teresa and I went to Broad Street, and then we moved to First Baptist in '98.
Do y'all sing like a barbershop quartet?
Used to. There were three guys that we used to sing Southern Gospel together, the three of us, Chad Smith, Jerry Burrell, Joe Washington at one time. Then
Joe Washington.
Then we stayed up too late for
Black
him
Fox
rehearsing.
Farm?
Yes. Uh-huh.
You know, I went to Las Vegas one weekend. I was getting on the plane. It was real late at night doing the red eye back to Cleveland.
Sure.
I get on the plane, and I looked over, and I thought, boy, that kind of looks familiar.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't figure out who he was. And he said, hey, Dee. And I said, how you doing? And he said, I'm Joe Washington. I said, Joe, what are the odds of that?
Somebody you wouldn't expect to see in that place.
Wouldn't expect to see him
in an
of
airplane.
all people.
Right, sure. Well, Joe sang with us for a while, and then David Goodwill.
I know
sang
David.
with us.
You know, he married the girl that lived in Eldridge Acres.
Oh, no, I didn't know Angie lived there.
She lived on the corner where up on to the, not Creek Bend.
Okay.
She lived on the corner on the left with the fence.
Okay, I know exactly where that. I did not know
That's
that.
where she grew up.
Well, sweet girl. She's a sweet girl. And Dave's a good fellow. You want to talk about a sense of humor.
Do they have the barbershop quartet? That's a little. How did that originate?
You know, I don't know. There are guys around here who are specialists in that, and you know that sound is a very, very specialized
different.
sound. And I know you know the Guyton brothers that are from here. Mm-hmm. They do a barbershop that was just, well, they were national award winning. I mean, I don't know how it started, but it's one of those. It's distinctive. You know, it doesn't. You know, at the second you hear it, and I don't know about you, but when I hear it, I always stop and listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
I always stop and listen to it because the harmony's so great. Harmony's so tight.
And they always wore striped.
Mm-hmm.
Remember on Andy Griffith when they was on the, and he had the guy, the prisoner, but he had to handcuff him so he wouldn't leave.
Yes, yes. Life would be a whole lot better if we taught that in school. Taught Andy Griffith.
It would. But barbershop quartet, I guess it's originated from a barbershop. Obviously.
I would assume it's probably the guys in there that were cutting hair.
Yeah.
And they all sang, but I don't know.
But you know, I've never been a singer. I don't know. I couldn't sing in public. I wouldn't sing in public if you paid me. It's just not my thing. I couldn't do it.
Well, you know, I've been blessed by lots of opportunities to sing, and it's something I've always. I mean, as long as I've been alive, I've been musical, and singing is the one thing that the reason I like it is because you don't have to have anything else. You know, to play a piano, you got to have a piano. Mm-hmm. Play a guitar, you got to have a guitar. Mm-hmm. Sing, all you got to do is sing, and so from a very John and Maxine Moore. Maxine Moore was my very first choir director when I was a cherub choir, and
what's a cherub choir?
Little bitty ones.
Oh, little bitty ones.
Little bitty ones, yeah.
Cherub.
Before you get to children's choirs, I'm not sure how many of us actually were cherubs. Most of us were torrents, as my grandmother would say. But then all the way through, and then I studied voice in college. Sang with a group and did musical theater in college, and so then when I got out, I started practicing law. Really not that many opportunities, not many things to do. I mean, you can, but it's hard if you're going to try to. And I really have a great deal of respect for these guys that go around and play in different venues. But for me, again, that wasn't me. So church was a natural outlet, and First Baptist, their choir program through Tom Wicks, and then the folks that came after Tom. Have been a huge blessing to me. I mean, they've given me so many opportunities to sing and so many opportunities to lead worship. And
so you're what do y'all like sing every Sunday in the choir?
Mm-hmm. We have choir every Sunday, and
so which service do you go to?
It varies, but usually I would sing. Lots of times I would sing both. Now. Again, we go back to something we talked about the whole time. When COVID hit, obviously things changed. And because of my job, I did not want to either catch COVID being connected to the choir or pass it to them because I'm around so many other people. So I stayed out until August of 2021. And so I came back in August of 2021 to the choir. It's been gone almost a year and a half. And then got COVID at the end of August. Was out again until January. And I still have some long haul symptoms. That's part of this laryngitis. Then got it again. I got the Omicron variant. So I'm just now back with the choir again. So I'm excited to get started back with them as soon as all this clears up.
Do you really enjoy getting in there? Do you have to wear a robe?
No. Now, when I first started at First Baptist, we did. And lots of other choirs I sang in.
But they don't require the robes now?
No, it's very casual now. Which I don't really care one way or the other. I enjoyed it. Didn't bother me to sing in a robe, but it's nice not to have to fool with putting it on, putting the stole on, all that kind of stuff too. So I'm not going to worry about it.
A robe wouldn't go real good with that West Eldridge Acres theme either. East Eldridge, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that, are you looking forward to another 8 years? Is it 8 years?
I am. There's unfinished business. Before COVID, we moved our office, and we've started.
You're right down here now, right?
Just right down from
Nice
me,
building.
It's a great facility. It's almost like it was built for us. But one of the things we have in there is a training facility, and we've already offered, I guess, about a half dozen classes to law enforcement to give them post credit, so they can have continuing education in specialty subjects. Well, I want to increase that. I think we can do a lot more and help our law enforcement agencies. And so now that once we get past the election, I'd like to get them scheduled regularly and have all different kinds of special training for them there. And that's great. But we've got other unfinished business with the folks that are addicted. We've got to work on expanding our
addicted to mean like to
drugs. We've got to expand our drug court. We've doubled it during the time I was in office. Judge Freiberg has been excellent to work with, and he and I worked together. My office worked with him to double the size of it over the last 8 years. But it's still so small. I want to bring that out and put it in Sessions Court so that it gets to the heart of the people, those 28,000 people, because there's a ton of them that maybe we can't give them the same level of service we do in criminal court and the same level of oversight, but we can get them started and perhaps cull some of them out and get them, started back in the right direction.
What do you think leads people to addictions? Do you think somebody said that everybody has an addiction, do you just pick which one you have?
I think there's some truth to that, but I'll say this, if you talk to the experts like on opioids and fentanyl, opioids, those sorts of things, and fentanyl is the most dangerous drug we've ever dealt with. We thought it would be methamphetamine, then we thought it would be heroin, but it's really fentanyl.
They say that fentanyl is just the worst of the worst.
It is because it is the most. It's the most addictive thing that I've seen from the perspective that people will do anything to get it. Great example. I handled a case for the DA over in Manchester because he had a conflict. And what happened was 3 people went and bought what they believed to be drugs that may have been laced with fentanyl. They didn't know, they weren't sure. So anyway, they get back to the house after buying it. One of them goes into the bathroom to use it. Well, he doesn't come out. So the girl and the guy that were left walk around. They can't get in the door. They walk around, look in the window, and the guy's laying in the floor. They open the window and they get in and they realize he's dead from an overdose. And the second guy, seeing that he had dropped some of it, took one right there and he died on top of that other fella.
God.
Now think about that for a second. Think about what has to be happening in somebody's mind that says, that guy took that and he just died, but I need it so bad, I'm going to risk it. They tell us, these experts tell us, that they can addict anybody to opioid given the right amount of dosage and the right amount of days. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I know that 1 out of 7 Tennesseans are going to be on that spectrum. Almost 1 million Tennesseans this year will be anything from, I called my dentist because I got a toothache. He says, I can't see you till Tuesday. John Stanberry, I can't see you till Tuesday, but here's hydrocodone and antibiotic. And I don't feel that. I don't do anything with it. All the way down to this fella that died from a fentanyl overdose. 1 million Tennesseans are going to fall in there. What's scary about opioids, and it's different than heroin, methamphetamine, any of these other drugs, is that somebody can become addicted with absolutely no intention of breaking the law or doing anything wrong or even becoming addicted or even liking it. A 15-year-old can become addicted because they tear an ACL playing
It could
sports.
be that simple.
A 25-year-old on the line at West Vaco or someplace has a problem with their labrum. They're prescribed
An abscess tooth.
an abscess tooth in your 30s. In your 40s, you have the onset. You're playing basketball or something when you shouldn't be. You break a bone. Your 50s, you're starting to see the onset of significant, maybe arthritic conditions. Mm-hmm. Same thing's true in the 70s and 60s and 70s. There's no group that's not susceptible to opioids, that's not in a dangerous or vulnerable class or vulnerable age group. And that's totally different than anything we've ever dealt with. So we've got to get to people earlier, and that's why moving from the criminal court model and expanding into the sessions court model is so important for us. Tennessee is a violent state. We're the second most violent state in the union, or the third, depending upon what you...
Violent?
Violent. And from Mountain City to Memphis, we're the second or third most violent state in the union. If you dig into those numbers, what you find is the vast majority of those increases are in what we would consider an aggravated assault between people who know each other. The vast majority of those incidents, that rise in violence between family members, between friends who fought over something stupid, between disgruntled lovers, neighbors who can't live next door to each other. We've seen an incredible growth in those in the last few years. So we've got to deal with those. We don't have prison space for everybody. Mm-hmm. And you think about it, we have, in the Tennessee Department of Corrections, we have roughly 38,000 beds. And we have another 30-something thousand beds probably across the state of Tennessee in local jails. Well, if you think about the number of crimes that are committed here, there are 4,000 cases that make it, let's say, to Bradley County. 4,000 counts, 4,000 cases. Steve Lawson and my other three sheriffs, Joe Guy, Tommy Jones, and Steve Ross, they have a combined maybe 1,600 beds. Well, everybody can't go to jail. I mean, we can't send everybody to jail. And anybody that thinks that's the model, first of all, is not really doing justice, because not everybody needs to go to jail. But we've got to do something to address, and I've been talking about this for a long time, that we've got to get at the heart of what's driving. We can't station a police officer in every household to prevent an act of violence. And we have a very low incidence of crime here outside of that. For example, while we've been sitting here talking, neither you or I have worried about our house getting broken into, or while we're sitting here, our cars getting broken into. We don't worry about, is something going to happen to us while we're driving here, or if I go to the store, if I go to a restaurant. We live safely in this community. Law enforcement does a great job of that.
Sure.
But crime exists. And so where we know it exists, we've got to look at ways of correcting that. A lot of those are heart problems. They're not problems that government's going to solve. If you've got two neighbors who just are going to fight, there's not much government can do about that until they fight.
You can't do anything about it till
Government
they've committed the crime.
That's right. And that's the, while, and I want to say this, Tennessee went through a really significant overhaul in the way they report crimes. I'm going to be honest with you. Those same statistics that say that we're the second most violent state in the union also would say that Athens is more dangerous than Memphis. Now, I don't believe that.
I don't believe that.
I want to meet the fella that would rather spend the night on the streets in Memphis than the streets in Athens. I really want to run into that guy.
Yeah.
So, statistics can be used to prove virtually anything.
Anything.
But nonetheless, when you see these reported incidents, regardless of whether they're, and these statistics say don't use them to compare state to state, just use them as a benchmark of what's going on that this department has seen. But when you see something that is compelling, like these interpersonal conflicts, then you need to try to figure that out. But government can't insert itself into the people's lives too deeply, or it shouldn't.
No, that's getting what none of us want.
No, and people, there are going to be people who are just. We all knew people growing up that were just mean.
That's just me.
They're just mean.
Yeah.
And yet there were some people that got into a serious fight in our high schools, not because they were either one were mean or bad people, just because they'd had enough of one another.
Bad day.
Same thing happens with adults. The problem is that we all want to do something about that, but none of us wants government to be so intrusive into our lives that they're watching us and monitoring us the way they do in the halls at the high school.
Yeah.
And when people, look, I trust law enforcement here. I trust law enforcement to know who the criminals are, to tell me who I need to focus on. And we listen to them. We talk to them. My folks talk to law enforcement all across this district every day on just those issues. We sit back and we say, this is somebody we've got to pay attention to. And when they mess up, we've got to make sure that we deal with them and we get them out of this community. At the same time, they'll come to us and they'll say, look, this guy did something really bad. He did something bad. He broke the law. It's a crime. But he's a good person overall. And we need to figure out a way to see if we can fix this. And that's great. But you know, once you've committed certain crimes, you can't do that. You can't do that. But what you have to do is you try to sort through those and figure out the ones where the government really does need to be involved, where we do need to send somebody to prison.
So you're saying some are semi-judgment calls, but others, there's no judgment.
That's right. And like I say, law enforcement does a great job of identifying if there are problem areas where crime's going on. We work with them all the time to really focus in on, hey, any crime on this street, we need to be paying attention to what's happening on this street or in this neighborhood. I mean, right now I get routine updates on 4 neighborhoods across just Bradley County where I have a very special interest in some folks that live in there. And it doesn't mean I'm driving by and I'm trying to look in it doesn't mean we're violating their rights. It just means I'm paying attention to everything they do. And I'm looking for an opportunity to clear a problem out of a neighborhood.
You know, if I want to know if we need more brick on a job, I ask the brick mason.
Absolutely.
I don't ask the plumber.
That's right. And that's what we do.
That's what you're saying.
Absolutely. We go to, we talk and you know, each county is different and their law enforcement is set up differently, but they all work in the very same ways. They're all patrolmen, patrolwomen
They got their thumb on it.
they know where it is.
They got their hand on the pulse.
And I wanted to make sure that we never let anything. So when I came into office, I established an on-call phone so that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in both ends of the district, there are at least 2 lawyers that are available for somebody to call, some law enforcement officer to call. Hey, I need y'all to know that this happened, or I need your advice about this, whether it's 4 a.m. or it's 9 a.m.
Oh boy, isn't it a shame you have to do that?
It is, but it's the only way we could. It's the only way we could be helpful to them, and it's also the only way that things couldn't fall between the cracks. Not that they do something wrong, but if we don't know about it, we can't. For example, if we don't know somebody got arrested and they just had gotten out on bond, we don't know that we need to go in and ask for their bond to be revoked.
Yeah, you wouldn't know it.
And so the on-call phone has been a great way to do that. Of course, law enforcement also, if it's a serious case, they'll bypass that and they'll call my investigators and get us involved that way, particularly something that's going to involve TBI, homicide case, something like that. But communicating with those guys about what's important and where they want us to put our emphasis. Doesn't mean we always agree. Loss and I always laugh about the fact that, you know, we can be a little bit nose to nose with one another and then say, all right, where we're going for lunch, you know, and that working through issues. And we don't always agree, but we do always want to come out with the same vision and the same direction. And over the last 8 years, I feel like we've done that, and I want to continue doing that. You know, you ask, am I looking forward to another 8? I am. I love this job. I almost left the practice of law. Was really getting ready to try to do medicine because I didn't feel like I was helping anybody. And Carl Petty, I'm sure you remember Carl. Mm-hmm. Carl was an assistant DA, and I ran into him in juvenile court because Judge Deacon had called me over to look at a file before court the next day. He wanted me to be ready, so so I came over, looked at it, and
I want you to be ready.
That's right. and so I came over there, and Carl said, we were chit chatting, and Dee, I have no idea why I said this, but I said, if there's ever an opening at the DA's office, I might be interested in coming over there. And the instant I said, I thought to myself, what are you doing? You're talking to Emory University about coming down there and going to PA school. What are you doing? Mm-hmm. So I went back to the office and I called my wife and I said, you're not going to believe what I just said. This is the craziest thing I've ever said. And this is the craziest thing idea I've ever had. She said, I don't know. I don't know. So anyway, the next day I go to court and Carl hands me an application. Long story short, by the time the weekend had rolled around, that was on a Thursday game, but by the time Sunday had rolled around, I'd gone through a couple of interviews with them. And I decided, yeah, I do want this job. So Jerry Estes hired me on August 25th, I think it was, of 1997. I was sworn in as an assistant DA. And I went into the office that first day afterwards, and there was a big stack of green files, all our criminal court cases. So I opened that first one, and I thought, this doesn't seem like a very good case. Yeah. So I put it down and picked up the next one. It was worse than the first one. And I went down about halfway through. Everybody culled out their dogs, which I learned was the way you did things. But Dee, after about 3 weeks in that job, I knew I never wanted to do anything else. It wasn't something that I got paid to do. It was something that every morning I got up and I looked forward to going to work, even the bad days. And when I knew I was going to have a bad day. On Sunday night, I know so many lawyers that just dread going to work. I know so many people. Mm-hmm. Every Sunday night, I'm excited that I get to go to work. And it's because every day you get to change the world a little bit. Now, it may be that much. It may be so much that you can't slide a piece of paper between your fingers. Mm. There's some days your arms can't stretch wide enough. And so yes, I am really hopeful that people will send me back to do this job again because I love it. I love serving them. And I believe we've made a huge difference. You know, we talked about expanding the recovery court. At the same time we were expanding recovery court, we sent 4 times the number of drug dealers to prison that Chattanooga did. Now, you might think statistically an anomaly of 15 or 20%, 400, almost 400%. And so I don't believe there's a one-size-fits-all model. I'm not suggesting to you that I've been without error while I've been working here. Nobody's perfect. But I can tell you that there's nobody across this state that's gotten up every morning and tried to work any harder for the people than I have. And I just hope the folks will see that and send me back. You're welcome, my friend. Good to see you.